Hour number 2 of Beyond the Beltway continues from Evanston, Illinois. I'm Bruce DuMont. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on the Smart Talk Radio Network. And I want to go with a caller to start this hour because he's been standing by for quite some time. Let's go to David, listening to us in the great state of Washington. Go ahead.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Bruce.
I've got a question, David. I've got a question for you before you ask me a question.
Oh God, I know it's coming. Go ahead.
No, you don't. You are coming. I called from the great state of Washington. Do you want another state of Washington, D.C.?
No, I'd like that part of Washington, D.C. to be incorporated into adjoining states. That's the most sensible answer to the equation. That gets representation to the people that they so sorely say need representation.
Okay, stand by. I want to get everybody's reaction to your answer because it's a good question for the guests as well. Jeanne Ives, if you were a member of Congress and you've tried to be a member of Congress, would you support the idea of D.C. statehood, and why or why not?
No, I disagree with D.C. statehood, and I think that it's unconstitutional as I read the legislation that's been proposed.
Josh Kantrow.
I agree with Jeanne. It's unconstitutional. It's a bad idea, and I do like the caller's idea.
David Masciotra.
I support statehood, but I also would support the incorporation idea because as it stands right now, as the caller suggested, the residents of D.C. have almost no independent representation of their own, and that shouldn't stand. That's voter nullification.
Jim Gierach, you figure you favor statehood for D.C.?
I do. I would add D.C. as a state, and it would make it easier to break the tie vote that we're suspecting will be coming along.
Okay. So you're looking at it from a political standpoint, supporting the Democrats. It's going to be 2 more U.S. senators. What about the concept of what the caller suggested, though? I mean, let's say that maybe you don't get quite that far, and the Democrats are going to try for that, but why not split, at least for elections? At least for elections.
In America, it's fundamental that people should be represented. That's one of the reasons they threw the T in the Bay. Just as people should have the right to vote, people should be represented in the halls of Congress, making the laws and deciding what direction we go on many of these important issues.
And the vote to right, the right to vote would also include those who have served time in prison, I assume, you're from your perspective. Does it also include those that are currently serving? If someone
most states now allow people after they've served their time to vote, and that's as it should be.
What about those that are currently serving in prison? Should they vote?
Well, I think that's more debatable. Even people who are in prison are still citizens, and they have problems with their life and the conditions that they're living under, and so I don't have a hard time allowing those people to vote either.
Jeanne Ives, your take on that?
Well, listen, the Democrats want to upend everything and there's no moderation at all in this particular Congress or this Biden administration. I mean, from basically federalizing election laws, they want to do that. They want D.C. statehood. The House passed a bill for that. The House already passed legislation on packing the Supreme Court. I mean, there's no stopping this train right now except for the Republican Senate and Manchin, fortunately.
Bruce?
Go ahead.
Yeah, just very quick response to Jeanne. I always enjoyed being on the program with her.
Yeah.
But election laws were federal until the Supreme Court Shelby decision, which was handed down in 2012. So that's not exactly new. Also, in 1959, Hawaii and Alaska became states. Both of my parents were born before 59. So, you might want to couch these ideas, and I'm not questioning your sincerity, as radical, but they're really not. They're entirely in keeping with.
But in 1959, well, just one second. In 1959, at least those that were discussing the issue then, they thought that there would be one state that would be overwhelmingly Democrat, and they were right, Hawaii, and one state that would be predominantly Republican, Alaska, and it was. So it was a little, each side got something they could crow about. In this particular case, what do the Republicans get out of this? Jeanne Ives.
Well, it's not even that. It's just simply that that population could be subsumed into Maryland or Virginia easily, and you could still keep this small circumference around the Capitol that is part of the Constitution, that it's going to be there. And that's the answer more than anything. We don't need a whole nother state. They're just doing this for political purposes. Everybody knows that.
Can I put my hand up, Bruce?
Yes. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead. Back to you.
So I'd just like to say that the idea of making statehood so we can break a tie is the epitome of politicizing something. That's just ridiculous. I mean, if San Diego currently was not part of California, I'm simply suggesting it would be the same as saying, okay, now San Diego, you're part of California. Now they get representation. That's perfectly appropriate, and it doesn't politicize the topic. And you did throw me a complete curveball there, Bruce, by the way. But and also, if you're in prison currently, you should not be able to vote. You're getting a penance. But once you've paid your penance to society and you're released, you should get all your rights back.
Right.
That's just how it should be.
Right. I agree with that. And by the way, I think Republicans should do more at the state and national level. I know they've done it recently at the national level with the Second Chance Act, but I think Republicans should do more to vie for the prison vote. I mean, it's a huge voting block, and Republicans are perceived as always, standing in the schoolroom door on that, which is not the case. It wasn't the case in Florida, and they should do more on it. You call, we completely threw you a curveball. What did you call about, David?
Well, I called about the racial issue we were talking about in policing.
Good.
And I was going to give a shout out to Jeanne for her, West Point issue, because I served with a couple West Point people, and they took the Marine Corps nice option. But I was going to give a shout out. But I was going to say on the policing, I'm so sick of everything being made into a racist type issue. Everything from the Chauvin trial, the Michael Brown. You had after the trial, you had people coming out and making statements comparing the Chauvin trial to Michael Brown and other cases where racism was never proven. In fact, the Michael Brown case, that officer, they looked at that case 3 different times. And none of those times did they come up with any reason to charge that officer. But yet they still bring that case up as part of the long list of cases that prove systemic racism in this country. And if you want to know what systemic racism would look like, it would be a country where black athletes were not allowed to be paid more than a white athlete. You would not be allowed to be an Oprah Winfrey and have the billions of dollars she has. That would be a systemically racist country. You would not be allowed to progress in that kind of a country. And yes,
you would not be a 2-term former president of the United States.
Absolutely not.
Right. And you wouldn't be a vice president of the United States if that were the case.
No.
David, we've got to move on. You've got more than your quarter's worth tonight. We're going to roll on, and we're going to switch gears and talk about some other subjects. 1-800-723-8289. Thank you very much, David. And again, if you want to join the conversation, I may throw you a question as well. 1-800-723-8289 from coast to coast and border to border every Sunday night on the Smart Talk Radio Network. I'm Bruce DuMont from Evanston, Illinois. Bruce DuMont back. We're getting some comments on our Facebook feed. Jeff Gotland, who watches the show, is watching the show in beautiful Palm Springs, California. He says, quote, I have seen local news stories with ABC and NBC News reports on the inability to get their former employees to come back to work. These are businesses that have obviously been down during the COVID-19. The unemployment was $300 weekly. These bonuses will last until July or September. I believe it's September.
Yep.
And the COVID payments, children not back in school, payments are equivalent to $15 per hour. So why would you go back to work if you're getting that money tax-free? So, David, there's somebody that challenges what you had to say on that. And Josh, you've got your hand up. You want to jump in?
Yes, Bruce. I just want to say that comports with everything that I have seen and heard throughout my travels in the country over the past year. And talking to small business owners, these aren't all conservative Republicans. Some of them really hated Trump and they were Democrats and all of this stuff. But they all agree on this. And I heard this from so many people and had in-depth discussions with small business owners throughout the country that it's real. It's true.
Okay.
This is happening. And it's a problem.
Okay.
Okay, well,
Go ahead, David.
Let's just, for the sake of conversation, say that it is happening and it is a problem. Just for the sake of conversation, isn't that an excellent argument for raising the minimum wage? Wouldn't it seem that would prove wages are too low?
No.
No, not at all. That's what markets do.
Jeanne,
markets improve the minimum wage. In fact, the small business people that I know, they're typically paying minimum wage in this area, and having a federal minimum wage is an outrageous idea when you have such a disparity in income and cost of living around the United States. You can't do that to small businesses. You will break them. They cannot afford it because, I'm sorry, but when you say a $15 minimum wage to the business, it's costing them easily $20 just for all the other additional taxes and whatnot on them. So, I mean, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, but you're saying,
last word to you, and then I'm going to switch gears. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you're saying that we need to provide more incentives for people to want to work. It would seem that higher pay and better benefits would be those exact incentives, and yet you're against all of that.
No,
So
we
you
need the
want
government
more
out of the way
for
and not
miserly
interfering in the market. That's what we need. And by providing this extended unemployment and all of these stimulus checks, which are not needed, people are getting vaccinated, the economy's coming back. We need to listen to the small business community. The large corporations and the big public employee unions, they have a lobby. And the Congress listens to them because they write the big checks. What I'm talking about should not be a partisan issue. It is not a Democratic issue or Republican issue. I am speaking up for the small business owners across this country who, when they hear that I'm on a national radio program, they beg me to bring this issue up. So this is for them. This is for them. I don't care about the big corporations. I'm talking about the small business owners, the neighborhood cafes, the businesses that we all like to go to that are dying because of COVID and because of the policy response. The government just needs to get out of the way.
Jim Gierach, what do you think? Government out of the way? You'd like them to get out of the way?
I frankly agree that the checkbook has been open for too many people, too many unemployed for too long, without giving some consideration to the countervailing thought that it's an incentive not to go to work. I think it's a good response, David, that okay, let's raise the minimum wage to $15 because it addresses the economics of people who aren't earning enough, so they're incentivized to do the wrong thing. And then this checkbook has been open for people who don't need the money, who are not employed, who haven't suffered a loss. And yet I couldn't believe they didn't reduce the number to like 75,000. You've got to be making 75,000 instead of, what was it, 150, I think. Right. I mean, they should have grossly reduced it.
Speaking about speaking about incentives and disincentives, what is the disincentive, Jeanne Ives, for someone living in one of the triangle countries? What's the disincentive for them not coming or attempting to come to the United States?
Well, right now we know that there really isn't a disincentive. I guess it's always hard to leave your homeland. But many of them are in corrupted governments where they don't physically feel safe. And it's simply because they are run amok by gangs and crony corporate structures. And it's heart-wrenching. But the answer is not to incentivize them to come to the United States. We can't do that because it's a dangerous journey. And many of them are trafficking their children. I go back to my Texas Policy Foundation interview with Josh Jones. I mean, you can listen to it online. It'll be up this week. But I mean, he literally said they are taking these children and recycling them back over, because if you come with a child, you are getting fully entered into the United States with no questions asked. And so this is really harmful to the children. But they're incentivized because of the money factor and the extreme poverty and the corruption.
Is there anything that can be done then by our government to provide any support to these triangle countries? Because do we really trust the triangle countries to create programs that would keep their citizens in their country and not come to the United States? Jim Gierach. Yes, answer that one.
Okay, Jim.
But answer that question and then go on. Jim?
Who's the question directed to?
Towards you.
Okay.
You had your hand up.
People have an incentive to come to our southern border because of the economic destitution and conditions in these Central American countries. But there's a secondary motivation, and that is that the government is so corrupt, even when we send money there, there's little chance that it's going to get to the people to help.
Right.
But number two, drug gangs run much of these Central American countries. Either your son's going to work for our drug cartel or we're going to kill him. Well, he's not going. Boom. How about your other son? The United States insists that the world have drug prohibition through the United Nations. So the United Nations passed the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. It requires the entire world, 186 nations, approved that treaty. That treaty requires each nation to go home and to enact legislative and administrative laws that criminalize drug use and provides for the incarceration of people who violate the terms of those prohibition treaties. Because of that, the United States in 1971 went from 300,000 prison population to 2 million people, becoming the prison capital of the world, with bills at the state and national level to the point that we couldn't pay the bills.
Jim, hang on a second, because Josh said earlier in the program when I asked him to respond to something, he said there were some things that you were saying that he agreed with. So let's focus, Josh, to you, and then we're going to go to David. Focus, if you will, on what can be done, if anything, to the triangle countries who allegedly are being run by corrupt governments with maybe heavy involvement by the drug cartels.
Well,
No. I know you said it. But Josh, go ahead.
Yes. So it seems to me that the prior administration had worked out deals with these countries to keep citizens in those countries while they were applying for asylum in America. And everybody talks about Trump this and he's bad that and this and that. But those deals were worked out. And actually, Trump had a really good working relationship with Mexico's president. I'd like to see us go back to whatever the Trump administration was doing before this surge and this influx, where we have a president who campaigned on come to this country. I'm going to open the border. I mean, he didn't say it in those words, but that's essentially what he was saying.
David Masciotra, on just one aspect of this, what was wrong with the processing in Mexico, which was part of President Trump's policy, which let people make their case for asylum in Mexico, and while they were being processed, that's exactly where they were staying. They didn't step one foot in the United States. What was wrong with that policy, which Joe Biden got rid of ASAP after he became president?
It was a humanitarian nightmare because
Why?
you had people who were fleeing persecution, fleeing threats of violence. Sometimes the violent perpetrators were within their own home, women facing abuse and other forms of sex trafficking. They couldn't leave their local community. So sure, they could submit an application, but they're still there in danger. That's the problem.
David, answer. Here's the $64,000 question for a progressive. Why is that our problem? Why is that the problem of the United States of America to worry about all the people in the triangle countries all of them that are alive today, all of them that will be alive in the next 40 years, why is it our responsibility to take them in, give them shelter, and give them protection?
Well, first of all, the United States passed a law in the 1960s, and it also co-signed an international treaty saying that they would give at least a hearing to anyone seeking asylum. So that's law, and that was done after the Holocaust, or it was done because of the Holocaust, because there was an agreement that countries weren't as welcoming as they should have been to Jews escaping the horrors.
I want you to follow up on that, but we do have to pause. I want to get everybody's reaction to it. I'm Bruce DuMont, 1-800-723-8289. Back shortly from Evanston, Illinois. Bruce DuMont back. Thanks very much for joining us this evening. David Masciotra is here. He is author of a new book called I Am Somebody. It's about Jesse Jackson, and a very important book that's out. Jim Gierach is here. He has spent most of his adult life looking for drug policy reforms. He's been successful in some areas. He ran for the Cook County State's Attorney. He also ran for governor in a Democratic primary and was unsuccessful. Jeanne Ives ran for governor in a Republican primary and was unsuccessful. So we've got a couple of people that know what primary defeat is all about, and also our election defeat is about, I should say. And Josh Kantrow joins us. He is a very articulate lawyer, and we thank them all for joining us tonight. We're going to get back to our discussion and a call in just a moment. But let me just mention something. And this is primarily for people who are watching the program either on Facebook Live or on YouTube. You probably know that whenever we go to a commercial break, we sort of dissolve and we show you a picture of one of our many affiliate markets. And it's a little slide that basically says, "Don't go away, we'll be right back," or Bruce DuMont's name on it. And my question to you is, we put one up. I'm going to throw it up right now. This is something that I personally took just a few blocks from my house. And this is a beauty shot from the city of Chicago. And I'm sure that everybody listening to the program this evening has in your hometown a very nice, pretty shot. A nice, it could be a postcard. If you want to include that as part of the bumper graphics that we use on this program, all you have to do is take a nice little picture of it with your iPhone or your Android and send it to me at Bruce DuMont, 1944, at gmail.com. And maybe we will include a photo from your hometown. Obviously, let us know where it is, and if it's a favorite watering hole. It can be a tourist shot, or it can be a place where people gather to listen and watch Beyond the Beltway every Sunday night. Let's go back to calls. Terry is he's around the campfire in El Paso, Texas, and we welcome him to the broadcast this evening. Terry, what's on your mind tonight?
The Washington, D.C. statehood issue.
Yes,
I tend to agree. With those who think it would be a constitutional problem, but that's not my point tonight. I also agree with those who say that they're citizens of Washington, D.C. don't endure taxation without representation. My suggestion would be for the Senate and House to pass a bill exempting all the citizens of Washington, D.C. from federal taxation. Now, that would have two effects. It would kill the argument about no taxation without representation. And two, I think there's enough people that would try to move to Washington, D.C. to avoid federal taxes that you might get more political balance in that city. So, to me, it's a twofer.
I would think it would be too small. I don't know whether there's the.
Well, it'd be small. That's true. I mean, it's not going to. Yeah, but there's no doubt that some people would consider that in where they decided to live.
Okay. No, I certainly agree with that. Anybody that cares about taxation, that's why so many people are going to Florida, because taxes are low and they don't have a state income tax.
Right, and it would make it much more fair for the people that do not have representation.
All right, let's let Jim Gierach. Looks like he wants to jump in on this.
Well, if you lower my taxes, then I don't have a right to vote. It doesn't seem like a good response. People should be represented by people in government, and you shouldn't take an area the size of D.C. with the number of people that are living there and not afford them the same thing that we maybe will be offering Puerto Rico
It's
and
also
other places.
It's also one of the worst run cities, one of the highest crime rate cities. There's nothing that's other than the monuments. There really isn't anything, and the local business of government. There really isn't a lot. There's a lot of beauty there, but there isn't a lot of reason to go there. So,
Bruce, whose drug policy did we have to live with in D.C.? All across America,
Johnson and
every
Johnson.
city,
Blame
every
Johnson
hamlet,
and Johnson.
every village, drug prohibition.
Okay, all right. Well, I want to go back. Okay,
When
Jim, you go ahead. Terry, thank you for your call. It looks like Josh wants to jump in. Josh?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I don't think there's a whole lot of federal taxes being paid by DC compared to the rest of the country. It's such a small percentage.
Okay.
So, in any event, it's really a bad idea, and it's unconstitutional.
Okay,
thanks. DC statehood is not going to happen.
We're gonna move on. Terry, thanks very much for your call. Jeanne, I don't believe that you've been on the program since the January 6th insurrection on the Hill. So my question to you is, as someone who's a lifelong Republican, how badly did that incident hurt the brand of the Republican Party?
Well, I mean, it certainly had its effect, I would say, but it was more associated with President Trump, who still is seen as the ideological leader of the party. There's no doubt about it. He really is. But as his time out of office sort of fades to some degree, I think that, Republicans, we've all been a little bit more individualistic. We don't necessarily come together like the Democrats. And so we like to stand on our own a little bit more. And you had Republicans vote to impeach Trump over that incident, which would have never happened in the Democrat Party. So I think we can separate ourselves from that. I think what's really harmful here is that you've actually had some Democrats, though, say that the insurrection, or it's not even an insurrection, the skirmish, the illegal entry into the Capitol, is similar to 9/11, to Pearl Harbor. I mean, who are they kidding? This is a ridiculous comparison. It needs to be tamped down. It was nothing of the sort, and everything needs to be put back in perspective here, because people are getting way over their skis thinking that this was that major of an event.
Josh, let me ask you a question a little bit differently, but the incident of January 6th, how bad, in your view, did it tarnish the image of Donald Trump to those people who did not think that it was significantly tarnished before January 6th?
I think it unfortunately played into a lot of what people said about Trump, that, those of us who defended him for many years, including me on this show, it unfortunately played into it. I mean, I've been a vocal critic of the president's role in what happened there. And it wasn't just his remarks on January 6th, but it was everything leading up to that. Having said that, I agree with Jeanne. It's been way overblown by the media. I mean, look, we had Democrat Maxine Waters walk into Minneapolis.
But would you? I'm gonna make that point, but I want to ask it this way: would you agree that the actions of some people who have identified themselves as Trump supporters, in reality, as well as the perception that media has created of that mob that showed up on Capitol Hill, that has created an image for the party that leaders of the party who want to win elections can't go too far in denouncing that action, because if they did, they would lose some voters, maybe a significant number of voters who were represented by that group and who may liked what was done that day, or at least liked the idea that there were people who cared enough about America to show up and vent their spleen with the world watching.
Bruce, there may be some truth to that, but the reality is that Republicans, as Jeanne said, are more independent. They have denounced. There have been denunciations from top Republicans, including past party leaders and existing party leaders. And, I would just love to see more of that happening on the other side. And we don't see it. There was not a single Democrat who voted to censure Maxine Waters for her potential obstruction of justice and clear incitement. She had no business going into Minneapolis and stirring things up like she did.
David Masciotra, respond just to that particular point. There isn't a Democrat that's going to stand up to Maxine Waters, just like there's a lot of people in the Republican Party that don't want to stand up to some of the leaders of the movement that showed up on Capitol Hill. Truth or not true?
I don't think that's true. You will get some Democrats who criticize Waters, but more to the point, it's an asinine comparison.
Who?
I'm sure if Biden was asked, he would.
No. But who? Who in the Democratic Party stood up and said that what Maxine Waters said was inappropriate? The judge said it. But what Democrat said, you know what, that's too far. You shouldn't do that. Or what Democrat has stood up and said to Tlaib and some of the members of the squad, you know what, I don't like your comments. They're too anti-Semitic.
Oh, there's many who've done that. You have a stronger argument on Waters, because I haven't heard any on Waters.
Who are they?
There's many
who
denounced Tlaib and others.
But do you know their names? Do you know their names?
I just said one, Joe Biden. He's the president of the United States.
He didn't denounce.
He didn't denounce
when he was a candidate. He did.
No, he doesn't.
No,
yes,
not
did.
By name. Not by name.
Oh yeah, he did. There was a whole Democratic primary in which he was asked about it during debates. So was Kamala Harris, who
he never denounced them by name. And my point is that each party they've got firebrands who speak before they're thinking, before they think. They are rabid and extreme in their rhetoric, and they can say whatever they want. The media will get upset. They will get more upset with a Republican that says something wacky than a Democrat. And there isn't anybody at the leadership of that party that's going to come out and call them out because they're too fearful that there's too many people in the Democratic Party, many of whom are African Americans, many of whom are not. They like what Maxine Waters has to say, and they also like the people that showed up at the Capitol and raised hell. Both parties have got to deal, so they've got to be too careful because they don't want to lose votes. We've got to pause, and then we'll be back with our last segment. You're listening to Beyond the Beltway on the Smart Talk Radio Network every Sunday night. Nice to have you with us. And I want to go back to you, Jeannie, Jeannie and Josh, to get your response. What do you think is the likelihood? The likelihood. Hi, who's that? Jim, who was that? There was some woman that just came in and took your headsets away.
They're talking and you can't hear them.
I know.
You can't hear them. That's because she took your headsets away. Your wife just, Jim, I think you got to file suit. You got to go call the police.
We're having a sound issue.
Okay, well, you're coming in loud and clear. Jeannie Ives, my question to you is this. Donald Trump, is he likely to be the Republican nominee, or do you believe, as I think I believe, that he is sending some signals that maybe he's not going to run again?
Well, nobody thought he was going to be the Republican nominee in 2016, but he was. So you never count Donald Trump out. But the more he gets out of office, I mean, I don't know. I think maybe he prefers to be a kingmaker. And certainly he's got a really tight relationship with Ron DeSantis, who's just doing an outstanding job as a governor. And I think, he may want to forge his way that way, but I think he'll always be playing in the game from here on out.
Josh, do you agree with my assessment that Donald Trump is maybe sending some signals that he likes the idea of maybe being the kingmaker and will not run again in 2024?
I don't know, Bruce. I mean, right now there's really nothing else for him to do other than be kingmaker in terms of midterms, in terms of governors and things like that. I just think it's too early to tell. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Donald Trump runs again.
Don't you think he should be focusing on his legal issues and on his financial issues? And those things are not going to go away if he chooses to run again.
Those issues are there regardless, as made up as the quote legal issues are.
Mhm.
To me, Donald Trump is a force in the party, and I just think it's too early to speculate in terms of what he should be doing or shouldn't be doing. Look, if he decides not to run, we have outstanding candidates:
Now
DeSantis,
go ahead.
Nikki Haley, etc.
Well, let's go back to Nikki Haley, because you've been on the program in recent years talking about Nikki Haley. In fact, you suggested that perhaps she should maybe even be a replacement for vice president. I think you said that on this program at one point.
I did say that.
But
yes.
she seems to have fallen out of favor with Donald Trump, who didn't even want to see her in Mar-a-Lago. Does that create a problem for her that she's got that? And by the way, she and Senator Rubio have both said that they will not run if Donald Trump runs.
Yeah, well, it does create a problem for her. As I said on this program last time I was on, Nikki Haley, I think she's terrific, but she made a really bad move by trying to cozy up to Tim Alberta at Politico. She thought that he was going to write a really nice piece about her if she criticized Trump a little bit, and instead he pocketed that and made that the lead part of the article, and then he criticized Nikki Haley at the same time and trashed her. So it was a bad move on her part. She's made some moves to get back to Trump. I'm hearing from insiders that there may be a real attempt at rapprochement there. We will see that. She is a great dynamic leader in the party, and Trump is a big part of the party as well. So I'm hoping that they can work that out.
Are there other players, Jeanne Ives, that you would like to see considering? It's also been said that Chris Christie has sort of made up his mind. At least he's telling friends that he may want to get into it. You sort of laugh at that. Are you laughing at him or laughing at the suggestion of it?
Yeah, no, I don't see Chris Christie playing on the national stage again, honestly, at all. I think we've got some really outstanding senators in Josh Hawley and in Ted Cruz still. These people can, stand up. They're standing up for the average American, and they're standing against the establishment. And they're common sense people. I think that they could play. I think we've got a lot of good governors that could play, not just DeSantis. Well, I've talked about Kristi Noem. She got a little flaky on the transgender bathroom bill or transgender sports bill. So that kind of, doesn't make people happy. But I think that we've got a deep seat, and I think the Democrats really have no idea.
One other issue I want to get everybody's reaction, but I'm going to start with the Republicans on this because in the history of this program, we've talked to an early boomlet many years ago to get rid of Gray Davis as the governor of California. They're now trying to get rid of the current governor, Gavin Newsom. And Caitlyn Jenner has announced that she is running for governor of California. Jeanne Ives, what do you think of that idea on a scale of 1 to 10? Where would you put it? The idea.
A 0.
A 0. Josh, where would you put it?
I would put it pretty low, probably around a 2 or a 3.
David Masciotra, where would you put it?
0.
0 chance. And Jim Gierach, where would you put it?
Put a 0.
How about if she came out and said, "Let's abolish the drug war"? Then you might agree with her.
Well, the funny thing is, President Trump, before he became a politician, said the only way we're ever going to stop drugs is to legalize them.
Okay, well.
And of course, once he became a politician, then there was bipartisan support.
I know. And you stopped praising him at that point.
You know,
on that note, we are out of time. Our thanks to Jim Gierach. Jim, thanks very much for joining us. Jeanne Ives, always a pleasure. Josh Kantrow, nice to have you back on the show. David Masciotra, you're one of our favorite guests. And I Am Somebody is the name of his book about Reverend Jesse Jackson. Our thanks to Connor McKnight for his assistance in the production of this program. I'm Bruce DuMont. Until next Sunday night at this same time, good night from Evanston, Illinois.